even get to cross.
Hello, everybody. This is your boy, DJ Barbecue, with another installment of the Kota iRadio Network, BTC Uncut Live. We have a special guest today, a real special guest. He is the godfather of audio, the Don of production. We have your boy, Logan Davis.
Hey, what's up, man?
Not much, man. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. And I will say, video. I know a little bit about audio, but video is my thing.
Right? How you been? Thank you for calling in.
Oh yeah, I've been really good. Just kind of a busy part of the season in some personal video production. I shoot a lot of weddings, but a lot of busyness there, and then trying to get this Now thing off the ground.
Right on.
Smoothly. So.
Well, speaking of Now, you are one of the co-owners of Now This Is Wrestling, if I did my research right. How did that all come about, and how did that come up? Because we always try to talk to people and try to get the beginning story.
Okay. Well, Now This Is Wrestling was actually born through Jeremy back in 2000. Oh, I want to say it's 2016. I might be off. Yeah, I think it's 2016. He has been, doing video in the Omaha area for a while with wrestling, and he decided to open his own promotion along with a pretty well-known YouTuber in the WWE game wrestling community, Tony Pete's guy, and they kind of went all out with this their first show called Inception, putting Bobby Lashley on there, and Arya Davari, and of course having an owner in a well-known name in the wrestling world, whether it's good or bad, Vince Russo.
Oh, the old Russo bro.
So they had a very successful show. Jeremy and I go back about 6 years at this point. So it was, I went there to support him as a friend or whatever. I wasn't part of that first show. And some things happened behind the scenes between him and that old business partner, and they just kind of put Now at a standstill. And then of course it reared its head in Magnum Pro. Had a little storyline going there for about a good year and a half, and Jeremy and I kind of got talking, and we'll kind of go back in my history with a lot of stuff too. Jeremy and I got to talking, and we're like, we love production, we love telling stories. Why don't we do this wrestling thing on our own? So
Right.
Kind of the rest is history. Back in January, doing a little bit of vignettes and all that stuff to kind of hype it back, and we had a very successful Phase 2 show here in Omaha with some great guests, Kimberly, Jessica Havoc, and the one and only Joey Ryan.
Right on.
So yeah, it's been a heck of a ride so far.
So we said a little bit of your knowledge about and history of what you've done just recently. Let's go back, way back. What got Logan Davis to be interested, or got that little stinger of that infection of professional wrestling?
Okay, so this goes way back into, like, I want to say way early 90s. My grandpa, he introduced me to wrestling, my grandpa and my uncle. And I have vivid memories of like 4 or 5 years old in my grandpa's basement in Davenport, Iowa, watching, Saturday night main event, watching just WrestleMania and all that stuff too. And from there, I was just always hooked. And my grandpa and my uncle would take me to events when they were in town. We moved to Omaha a few years later. And we went to, I think it was a Saturday night main event. I had to be like 6 or 7 when we went to that. And I just remember seeing names like Papa Shango, Ultimate Warrior, Repo Man. And I mean, these things are burned in my mind,
Right.
But I will say the one event that I'll always remember was back in 1996. It was an In Your House pay-per-view here in Omaha, Nebraska, called Good Friends, Better Enemies. One of my all-time favorite wrestlers, Shawn Michaels, was in the main event against Diesel.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially a street fight, and it was, epic. We were on the hard camera side. You go back on the network, you could probably see child me a couple times, just getting really into it. But it is a huge memory, and I thank my grandpa for giving me that bug. And I mean, he's still around, but he's definitely proud of what I'm doing in the wrestling world, and we always talk wrestling. That's kind of like always been our bond. When the Attitude Era was happening, man, he was kind of disgusted because he likes the old wrestling. I'm sure with his age, he was watching the 60s and 70s wrestling that's completely different, and then it starts making that turn and into the Attitude Era, and I just always remember him like seeing DX and whatever, and just shaking his head, just going, disgusting. I can't believe wrestling has got like this, but he would still watch it. That's the thing. And sometimes it was just so he can have a conversation with me, I think, and other times it's just still that love. Wrestling, you can complain. That's the thing about wrestling fans. We could still complain, but somehow we still come back to it all the time.
Right.
And I think that was kind of his story. But that's what my history of diving into wrestling and loving it.
You said it's something about your grandfather that kind of caught my attention here, where, he's probably about the 60s, 70s. It almost kind of interests me to see what his thoughts were of Adrian Adonis. Kind of like, he was ahead of his time, because there's a lot of characters now that you see that are using those type of the gimmicks. And it's just to see what his thoughts are, because there's a lot of nostalgic characters and gimmicks that everybody kind of takes from that era. And it's so much that it works so good right now, and it's interesting to see that. You were saying that you liked WrestleMania. Now, did you always have this liking for like the video concept
of like just home video and all
right?
that stuff?
I mean, did you kind of
Yes.
did you kind of like catch an eye for that when you were younger and you saw that on professional wrestling?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at my age, I am, let me think about that. I'm 34. At my age, who didn't love going to a Blockbuster or some video store and going to the wrestling section and picking out from that library? I love, like, I would always ask for, like, different VHS tapes. If I didn't get a VHS tape, I would probably get, something on Nintendo or Super Nintendo that was wrestling related, whether it be like a pro wrestling, Nintendo Pro Wrestling, or one of my all-time favorite games, WWF Raw, WWF Royal Rumble.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I loved, going into that VHS library. And I liked watching the events, yes. And more often than not, my grandpa would always get the pay-per-views. So, of course, again, being of my age, who didn't throw a VHS, inside the VCR and record the pay-per-view. So I had my own bootleg version, and if I somehow didn't get it, well, then I would try to find it at Blockbuster and go from there, man. I had the original WWE Network.
Right. I feel like I have to do a little PSA since I'm, just turned 39 on Tuesday. When he says VHS, that means a video cassette, which is a kind of a thin rectangular black, red, yellow, whatever colors they wanted to put it on, but it had tape in it like a cassette tape. And if you want to really go back, I'll do a PSA on that one. But anyway, the Blockbuster, you'd actually had to get off your couch. You had to go out the door, drive in your car, get a ride from mom or dad or grandpa or grandma, and go over there and pick your thing. And it was nothing like that nostalgic, like that smell that you walked into like a Blockbuster or a movie gallery. I mean, it reeked of excitement, not to steal words from Edge and Christian, but it was just like going to your own movie theater and being able to take that experience home. So, I mean, that's just kind of a little bit of knowledge I wanted to drop for some of the viewers and listeners that are listening to this kind of going, what's Blockbuster? What's the VHS? Because I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of them that are out there that probably listen to the show that, don't understand what those words are.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen... Since you're liking and you've been in the business with this video editing and all that stuff, what amazes you the most about the production side of it that has evolved from digital to, video cassettes to all this other stuff that's to the streaming point?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, here's the huge thing. I mean, of course, I was watching at a young age, and I'd say I really started getting hooked. I'd say a turning point to me with like production and stuff was right around the time when Vince McMahon first got stunned by Stone Cold. It just seemed like there was like a turning point. And I listened to a previous episode too, and I believe it was with Maru, where he was talking about the WWF production as opposed to the WCW production.
Right,
It was
right,
worlds of difference. But like when that 2001 hit, it was a whole nother ballgame for WWE.
right,
WWF turning to WWE. Those promos, I mean, nothing got you more hyped. Like, it could be the crappiest card, but they would put together such amazing video packages where you'd be like, Mom, I need $50 to watch this, pay-per-view right now. Or
right,
watch it scrambled. That's another thing you could do a PSA on too.
right.
Go to
Well,
the
I'll let you do that one. I'll let you do that. I'll share the wealth in that one, that PSA.
Yeah, so if you could not afford a pay-per-view, you could go to the pay-per-view channel back in the day, and there would be little scrambles. You could still hear it pretty well, but the visuals would be scrambled, glitched out and all that stuff too. So you'd be like listening as much as you can, like, okay, what's happening? Try to, like, every now and then that scramble would get a little bit clear for about a split second. You could see, something happening, but that's again, that's that fun of the old school watching wrestling. But that original point, the production, man, it just got you hyped. I mean, from the matchup screens too. I mean, who doesn't remember the green screen matchup screens where the wrestlers would like start moving and then pose and all that stuff too. And I've tried to bring that flavor a couple times here to the Omaha area where it's animated matchup screens with flashy music and flashy graphics. Man, they hit the mark on that. And I mean, I think that is really when my love for professional wrestling just grew so much. And that's when I really started to pay attention to that sort of stuff, to what I'm doing right now.
Right. You said you mentioned Omaha area, and actually, if people that don't know, and the people that are going to watch this on YouTube at the Kota Bear podcast on YouTube, or listening to on all these streaming devices, Omaha has a rich history of professional wrestling that goes back way back. Because, like you said, In Your House, that's one of those classic pay-per-views that I like because of the stage set, the way that it felt like more you're close into it, you're live in the action as a fan. Can you give some of the viewers and listeners a little knowledge of the history of professional wrestling in the Omaha area?
Well, I mean, man, they used to come here a lot at the Civic. It just seemed like every couple of years they would either do like a television taping, Saturday Night Main Event, when WWF Raw became a thing too, but you go way back. I'm not too privy on a lot of the stuff. I haven't really dove into the library, and honestly, I'd say a good guess in the future to try to reach out to is Pete Sanctions here in the area. He is an absolute encyclopedia of wrestling and the history of it all. He's a ring announcer for a couple companies around the Midwest too. So awesome guy, but they used to have wrestling in television studios. It used to have its own wrestling program here, and you had people like Mad Dog Vachon, who's from Omaha, and stuff like that. People like that starring in these shows too. So I mean, Omaha has a really rich history if you kind of dive into it. And unfortunately, I haven't really dug into that history. I kind of want to. I keep telling myself I have to get there and like try to find some of these archives, especially the stuff that they were doing in news stations here. Because I'm pretty sure that would just be amazing to just sit down and watch.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they just have like a Hall of Fame that's in Omaha?
Yes. That is run by a man named Donnie Dodge here, the Omaha Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. It is on its second year this year. The initial inductees last year, you had Mad Dog Vachon. You had Maurice Swanger, who's considered the godfather of professional wrestling here. He's the one who really started getting indie wrestling and wrestling training here in Omaha, starting in the early 2000s. This year you have names like Ted DiBiase, you have Abu, you have Donnie Pepper Cricket. Like, these are names Donnie Pepper Cricket, I know for sure. The South Dakota fans definitely know. He's been up to that area a few times too. So
I recommend everybody get a video or look up Now This Is Wrestling or some of the other just Midwest wrestling and look up Donnie Pepper Cricket. I mean, he's really well. He does really good.
he was one of our main events in phase two. Going, he's the one who went against the one and only Joey Ryan, and that was an absolutely entertaining match. But Donnie Dodge, I mean, he loves the history of wrestling. I mean, he is an uh, absolutely amazing historian, and not only that, he like works on other documentaries too, where he just does like thorough research. And he has, really taken off with this Hall of Fame. I'm looking forward to this year's presentation and kind of seeing. He also has the Chip Douglas Award too. Um, and if you dive into Chip Douglas, he was independent wrestler here too. He unfortunately died too young. And please, I don't know. I never knew the guy, but I kind of know the brief history of him too. He died of I believe an aneurysm, very young age, and just a really promising breakout wrestler here in the Omaha area. And Donnie Dodge named this award after him. And the inaugural Chip Douglas Award winner, another familiar name, Cold Stone Tim Boston.
Yes, yes.
So who knows? I don't know if they've announced the recipient this year, but yeah, another, and that's meant to go to somebody who's breaking out in the area, somebody who embodies everything Chip Douglas was. And to get that full story, I mean, you just Facebook, Omaha Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Right.
Donnie Dodge has done great work of putting video packages together of Chip Douglas and what that award represents and the history of Omaha wrestling.
Right. There's a lot of professional wrestlers that have a strong history and upbringing in the Midwest. Let's go to the fact that you were talking earlier. We started out with, because I wanted to have everybody know what you've been doing right now today. With you doing production and basically the ownership part of it, take somebody that's listening to the podcast and watching it on YouTube, take them step by step what it takes to go day by day and what it does on the actual day of the show.
Um, you know, I've been doing wrestling video production for we're on year 5, year 6 now, and I will tell you, show days are an absolute blur. Um, and I mean, stuff happens beforehand too. In my role, I'm kind of responsible of putting those hype packages together, going out and filming promos, putting together flashy entrance videos. And not only have I done that, for now, I've done that for brands like Magna Pro. I even did it for MAP for a while too. Um, and I will say, you're spending, a couple weeks beforehand making sure everybody has the right entrance music. You time that to a flashy entrance video. You kind of write out the script of what you're going to record that day too. Like, is there going to be any promotionals? What's going to happen after the fact? Are you going to have a post show? I did that a few times at my time at Magnum Pro, called Magnum Pro Recoil, where you kind of just it was a rundown of what happened that night with a few appearances from people who were on the show that night too. It's very very much like the post shows that you saw on WWE. Just very inspired by a lot of the stuff they do. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really have. I think a lot of times with a few people, I've kind of gained a reputation like, hey man, this Logan guy is kind of a kind of a dick. But I'm really, I'm, I think on show day, it's like unless I really have to talk to you, I'm thinking of a million different things, and I don't really talk to a lot of people. I'll give the handshake, hey, good, here's what you're doing tonight. Maybe talk a little bit right before the show when I have a little bit of a chance to breathe, but I mean, I'm just always on the go, 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 making sure everything's right. And not only was I doing at one point in time at Magnum Pros, I was doing the lights, programming the lights. I was scripting the shows. I was doing the video production, and it's just a lot of hats to wear. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of my downfall at times too. Like I wouldn't say I'm a control freak, but I'm really much a, hey, this has to go right. Um, and since I'm always moving all the time, I didn't really have a lot of people to kind of help me out in those roles. But a couple of years ago, I was graciously given a guy named Ryan do so here in the area too, and he kind of reached out and he kind of helped me out in the light production. And then we have I'm doing a lot of shout outs because I mean I really on this podcast, this episode, it's kind of like the time for the people behind the scenes to kind of shine too.
Right.
And
because that's the premise for the show is like everybody has a story. Everybody has I got my inspiration from Nick that we know. I don't need to brag about who he is, but if anybody else knows who he is, then that's fine with them. But I got inspiration from Nick, seeing people come up to him and talking to him, telling him stories. I got inspiration from you because of what you've done, and we'll get into a little bit later what you have done because you've traveled a pretty long road. No pun intended. But then there's other individuals that they know who they are that inspired me how to do this. That it's just that you're right. There's stories to be told. Other people in the background need to have those expressed, and this is an outlet for everybody to have this from the owners to the stagehands to fans and to the actual athletes. And I got that idea from JR because they are athletes. They're not just superstars, which they are, but I think more respectfully, they're athletes that go on the show. It doesn't matter who they are. But not to cut you off, I just wanted to say that out there.
Oh yeah, that's fine. But kind of going. I'm going to rewind a little bit. I started off in the wrestling world just holding a camera, shooting Magnum Pro. The first show that I filmed there was a show called Magnum Pro Gets Its Wings. That show had Drew McIntyre, Stevie Richards, and oh man, I'm forgetting it. It's Trevor Murdoch. Was on that show, and that was my first jump into the independent wrestling world. And honestly, I hadn't really watched a lot of independent wrestling up until that point. So that kind of brought me into the world, and that evolved over time. Like I said, the promoter over there, Jason Strife, he, the more he saw me work and the work ethic and what I wanted to put into it, started giving me more and more roles there too, putting that trust in me. And over time, like I said, it brought me a lot of awesome help. And I shouted out Ryan Russo. Let's not forget Shad, the cameraman. A lot of people in the Midwest All Pro community know him pretty well too.
Right. I kind of had a little thing about that last, was it Friday? At Supermania on the 27th. I thought that he was riding with Manning all over, but at one point, the way that I said my comment, it almost came out like I thought he was Manning. So he had a good time kind of giving me a little guff about that one. So I just had to say that out there.
That's just Shad's attitude too. He loves giving people crap all the time. He's just a really good dude.
He is a good dude.
He's having the time of his life. And honestly, I met him. He actually films at a minor league baseball team here in Omaha, and Magnum Pro ran a show at this minor league stadium, and he contacted me a couple days later. It's like, hey, I want to get involved in this, and gave him that chance in that first show. And I mean, he started riding up with me to Midwest All Pro, because that was right around the time I was doing a lot of work for Nick as well too. And I mean, he's just kind of take it and ran with it. And not only is he doing MAP, he's doing different promotions here different promotion here in Omaha. He's doing a lot in Iowa. I mean, he's just making a storm. He's having the time of his life, and God bless him. I love that he's in this world. Like I said, great guy.
Right.
And then nowadays too, and it's somebody who's been by my side a lot too when it came to behind the scenes. Her name's Danny. She is now kind of running production in the Magnum Pro since I've stepped away from that, and she absolutely sweetheart, kills it there too. So I mean, that's just kind of my cast of characters when it comes to, and obviously there's Jeremy too, and we'll kind of talk more about that too. But that's kind of like the unsung heroes, I guess, on my end, the cast of characters in my production world that I want to think a lot, know a lot too. Kind of kept me sane on those show days, like I was saying, where I didn't have a chance to breathe. They kind of picked up where I couldn't be and ran with it. So Thank you guys. If you're listening, you guys are awesome. Keep killing it.
Well, and one thing I want to say on this side of the spectrum is that I may not be able to go down to all the shows or up to the shows, because you're in Nebraska or up in Sioux Falls, which is like an hour and a half away. It depends on where the shows are, but I try to, and I got to say that I give props to everybody all out in this tri-state area. From Sioux City to Nebraska to to, or I should say Iowa, Sioux City, Iowa, and then Omaha, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, and then Sioux Falls, South Dakota, even up to North Dakota. Like, everything that you guys do is appreciative, because I tell you what, when I was a kid, this wasn't accessible at all. Not as much. And to be able to have this and be able to make those memories with my kid, and then whoever else has kids, like, I mean, we appreciate that. So I just wanted to say that out there, so you guys know, whoever's listening, that we do appreciate all your hard work, and it's just not the few fans that are there that show up every day. I mean, there's a lot that show up to every guy's promotion, but we that sometimes can't make it, we do appreciate everything that you're doing, because I watch on Facebook, watch videos, I share them. I'm so proud of everything that you guys are all doing.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you for that too. And the big thing too with, like, in our production roles too, we know the show's not about us, and at the end of the day, we love seeing, our work make these guys, like, be a big part of these guys becoming the big superstars that they are. I feel so good when I see somebody get opportunities like a WWE extra position. There's been Red Wing, who's familiar with him. He actually had a tryout in Orlando at one point too, at the PC. And then, of course, seeing the fans' reactions too, seeing those moments, like, again, going back to the time with my grandpa and my uncle, watching a lot of wrestling with them, seeing, and then, of course, being a father now too, like, seeing, dads, even moms, taking their kids out to these wrestling events, and the reactions that they're showing because of, they've gotten so invested because of that small part that we all play. It's, whether it be like the video package or building up a certain character or whatnot too. Like, man, that makes it all worth it.
Right.
At the end of the night, seeing those smiles, seeing the reactions, seeing kids shouting, having a good time, giving wrestlers crap, or just absolutely looking up to someone.
Right.
So that makes it all worth it.
So, I was just saying a little bit ago about you had a long road that you've traveled. Why don't you give the viewers and the listeners a little bit of taste of what you've done for that long road travel?
Okay. Well, yeah, I was kind of, I wouldn't say I was practicing last night, but I was kind of running over to try to abridge a lot because, I don't really like to, like, sing my praises at all. Like I said, I'm just a very, you know, private, humble, person that doesn't really like to wear what I've done on my, on my chest. But
Trust
I was
me,
kind of rehearsing.
trust me. If anybody's listening to this, I've severely have tried to push him to get him to talk about it. He doesn't like to talk about it that much, and I get it. But I think the story of how and what he's traveled is really cool. So that's the reason why I'm asking the question and trying to push him. So he'll probably you'll probably give me crap later after we're off the show.
Oh, it's all good. It's fun too. And I was actually talking with a coworker of mine about all this, and they tell me, you have a really cool story. You should you tell it sometime. But, like, let's go way back again. Like I was saying, in the early 2000s, really was drawn to the production of WWE, or when it was transitioning to WWE. They called it the Ruthless Aggression era and all that.
Right.
I'd go to live events and I'd find myself watching the cameraman, watching the production behind the scenes, and I'm like, you know what? I want to do that. And this had to be around 2003, 2004. I just graduated high school, and I was a drama nerd all through high school, acting, all that stuff. But later years, I was more drawn again to what was happening behind the scenes, putting all the show together too. What happens in the production role. And then a friend of mine we went in, got a camera together. We started filming, little vignettes and little shows, just stupid stuff. I mean, what teenagers do. And we found a school, Full Sail, and I was like, wow, I want to go to that school. Well, I look into information back then in 2004, and I'm like, holy crap, this is going to cost me my whole life to try to go to Full Sail. The tuition is not cheap. And this was before Full Sail is, like, basically the Full Sail you know now. Like, I think they've been around since the 70s. They still have a great reputation back, in the early 2000s, but definitely not what you see Full Sail as now.
Right.
Well, fast forward a couple years, meet my wife. We, had our daughter a year later. We got married in August of 2006. Had our daughter a year and a half later, and our son another year and a half later. And at that point in time, I was just like, I did not like working the 9 to 5 jobs, and that passion was starting to really uh, come out of me again too, where I wanted to film stuff. So we bought a video camera. I filmed a couple weddings, and then I was just like, I need to do this again. And at that point in time, I'm like, how can I do it? And the idea was brought, hey, why don't you try the military? And I did. I joined the Air Force, uh, served from 2009 to 2013. And I really wanted to go into public relations there so I could do more film, but silly me went in open general. And if don't know what that is, basically you just tell the military, hey, pick a job for me, because the job that I want isn't there, and you kind of hope that, hey, maybe a spot will open up. No, they put me in finance, and that's basically
Perfect.
processing paychecks for the military and getting yelled at when paychecks were wrong. So that was an interesting time of my life, going through all that. But once the time was up there, I cashed in my GI Bill in 2013. Obviously, I went to Full Sail. There was no question about that too. Went in for my bachelor's in film, and I did it online at first. I wasn't on campus. Lo and behold, right when I joined, though, that's when Triple H announced the partnership with Full Sail. They just built the PC. They said, "Hey, we're going to start filming shows at Full Sail." I'm like, "Holy moly, I want to be a part of this." Well, it's kind of hard to do online, and we weren't really ready to make the jump to Orlando at that moment in time. So I said, "What can I do here?" So I started my production company, Free Captive Productions, doing a lot of weddings. I got an internship with a place here called Omaha Nightlife as well, where every weekend we were highlighting different local bands and different bars and stuff like that. And I just started getting more and more freelance work as far as that's concerned. And then 2014, with my internship with Omaha Nightlife, I reached out to WWE and was like, "Hey, I'm going to be at WrestleMania 30, or not? Was it? Yeah, it was 30 in New Orleans. It was the Triple X. That was the fun time, right? WrestleMania Triple X.
Right.
But reach out to them and like, hey, I interned for Omaha Nightlife. I have a camera. Can I be a media person? And just through that Hail Mary pass, they didn't say anything for weeks, and then we're about a week before, we're like, well, I guess it's not happening. Well, you get that call from Stanford. I'm like, holy moly, like this is probably them. You get excited, but you're like, hey, they're gonna probably say, hey, we're
You
gonna
gotta
pass
breathe
them.
a little bit, like they,
Yeah. Yeah.
calm down.
Yeah.
Okay, hello.
Yep. And I pick it up, and it's Joe Villa, who does a lot of he's like their media guy
Right.
with WWE, and he's like, yeah, read everything. What do you guys really want to cover? I just told him, hey, we know you're coming to Omaha here soon, and we know you return to Omaha. We just want to put a little piece together of the experience of WrestleMania. He's like, okay, you guys got it. Kind of give us some ground rules of what not to do. So we're just like, holy crap, this is happening. This is, and by we, this is an old business partner of mine. His name's Elliot, huge wrestling fan. But we drove down to New Orleans. We go to Access, and I mean, the magic started happening. We're like, let's approach this like, like a night show, like a night talk show, like a Jimmy Fallon show. Like we
Right.
just had really goofy interviews. We got to interview Big E. We got to interview Tyler Breeze. I got to interview AJ Lee. And I say the I there because we threw that Hail Mary pass, because they're like, you're going to interview like people who are up and coming, mid-carders. You're not going to get really a main eventer.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, by this time, I think we were doing it for 2 days, and we've kind of built that rapport with their media team. And I was just like, well, let's ask. The worst they'll say is no, you can't interview AJ. And at the time, she was the Divas champion. And we go there, and he's like, sure, just don't talk about CM Punk, because this was like, right around the time CM Punk just left WWE.
Right.
And we're like, oh yeah, we're not gonna like get ourselves kicked out. Like we're having too much fun with this. And so I'm like, okay, Elliot, my friend, was doing most of the interviewing. I'm like, all right, so what are you gonna ask? He's like, no, I'm not doing this. This is all you, man. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, I don't know what to say. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So we're waiting in line, and this guy starts serenading her. And I'm like, okay, I guess I got the hook right there. This guy just serenaded. I'm gonna open with that. So the interview was awesome. It's still on my YouTube. It's something I'm really proud of. I always say the Easter egg in that is you can kind of see my hand trembling at one point. So I tuck it behind my, back because again, I'm a camera person. I am not an interviewer or a media personality by any means. So I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants with that, and it went well. I mean, AJ was just absolutely amazing, just really cool to talk to. And then my friend turns around, we interview Big E, and he tells us stories like, well, my wife says it looks like you have baby arms, and he just looks at him like, are you kidding me? And he's like, no, I think you misinterpreted me here. It looks like you have full-grown babies inside your arms. And he just like starts laughing. Like he's like, oh, okay, I can live with that one too. And I mean, that was just the approach we took, and it was an absolute blast. Well, I got invited to do it again the next year, but in between all that, that's where I found Magnum Pro Wrestling. And again, I was like, I'm not going to go to Orlando. How can I get to that next level to live that ultimate dream of working for WWE one day? Well,
Right.
What do wrestlers do? They work in the indies. So I was like, well, I guess the production people kind of have to do the same. You have to make your name in the indies too. So I reach out, I sent that WrestleMania, and that's why I tell that story. I sent that WrestleMania video to Magnum Pro, and Jason Strife responds. He's like, hey, looks pretty good. I'll send it to I already have a video guy, but I'll forward it to him and let you, start talking with him. And that video guy was Jeremy Lubash, their owner of Now This Is Wrestling. And so I go into his office, and so a funny story I like to tell about Jeremy. The thing is with production, Jeremy and I are very old school traditionalists when it comes to production, where there's a time to be a fan and there's time to be like, are you serious with this production, or are you just trying to get here so you can hang out with the wrestlers, have a drink with them, and just be buddy instead of actually doing work?
Yep.
So he starts grilling me like in this, like it was like an interview, and he's just like, so who's your favorite wrestler? Why is he your favorite wrestler? And he just starts going down this list of like, it was like Meet Your Parents. Like he's just grilling the heck out of me. And I'm just sitting there like, dude, if you think I'm going to be some sort of, and I use this term very nicely. I don't say it in any ways like an insult, but like, I'm not a mark by any means. Like, I like wrestling, but I'm not going to fangirl out if, people are right next to me. And the proving ground of that was this first show that I was part of, Magnum Pro. Like I said, Drew McIntyre, fresh on the indies after getting released by WWE, is on the very first show that I'm working on. Stevie Richards, somebody, he's not like a huge megastar, but he's pretty well known. I mean, Right to Censor, stuff like that, stuff I grew up on.
Stevie Richards?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And I'm just throwing I had my camera there, and I'm just like, okay, what are we doing? So we start doing interviews with the local guys arriving, and we just we build like this production that whole day. And we're just, Jeremy and I and Tony, the other guy that I was telling you about who helped found Now with Jeremy, we're just like clicking like clockwork. We're just like, okay, this is looking great. We're getting the best out of people. And then we're like, okay, let's go interview Stevie Richards. He does this pipe bomb of a promo, which was amazing. And there was a storyline that we ran to where he stole the Magnum Pro title from Devin Thomas, who was the Magnum Pro champion at the time. So we ran this cool angle where he stole it, and we had this promo that he just shot on everything from Evolve and just the wrestling industry as a whole. And I get goosebumps thinking of that promo, because I just remember like, holy crap, this is happening. I'm filming wrestling promos, and the very first thing I do is essentially a shoot promo, and it's just so full of energy. Again, look that up. Magnum Pro's YouTube. It's amazing. And then we interview Drew McIntyre, and we're like, I don't know what to say. Like, he really didn't do too, like, he had his match, but he didn't really do anything noteworthy. Well, we found out a fan made him a My Little Pony, like a custom My Little Pony. And we're like, why don't we have this fan, present this My Little Pony in the interview? And one of the funniest things we like about that too is Drew McIntyre, he looks at the camera, he's like, oh, My Little Pony, and in his Scottish accent, which I cannot do clearly.
My Little Pony.
My Little Pony.
My Little Pony.
But yeah, I mean, the rest is history from there. Like, I started off doing just camera work, editing shows, and then That evolved into, writing stories, that evolved into running lights and basically show running, and as Strife would call it, being his executive producer. With that, over time, and I won't really dive in, I'll kind of save some for it because I know you want Jeremy on the show here in the future, but I'll kind of save his story, when he left Magnum. But when he left, I kind of still stood around and did everything that I was doing there too. Well, I want to say it was around late 2017. I graduated in 2015, but I was kind of having that bug of, hey, I want to go back to school, but I don't want to do online. I actually want to go to Orlando and do something there in person. And I chose public relations because I really want to get to like the marketing world and stuff like that. So my wife, her name's Chrissy. She's also a co-owner of Now Too. She kind of inspired me to like, if we're going to leave, let's do this together. This is something you've been wanting. If we need to pick up and move to Orlando, let's do it. When she said that, I'm like, okay, let's do it. And I mean, I pretty much erased this life here. Like we sold a lot of our possessions, packed up the car as much as we could, and drove to Orlando, Florida.
There's a classic photo of you with you and your wife up front and your family in the back.
Oh yeah.
That is just it's just epic to see. If anybody knows Logan, you know exactly what picture I'm talking about. It absolutely was classic. It depicted everything that was all good with the situation that you guys had.
Yeah, it was tough, and I'm not gonna lie there too. Like leaving behind everything, because I mean, again, Magnum Pro was all I knew in the wrestling world. I did so much, and I was leaving essentially this family behind too, the wrestling community here too. And let's not. I mean, I kind of breezed over a lot of Magnum Pro. Let's throw MAP in there as well too. I was doing a lot of stuff for there at one point, and the only reason I stopped going there is just I couldn't. I live in Omaha. Sioux Falls about 3 hours away. At the time, a lot of Nick's shows were on Sundays, and it just became too much of a family burden. And it's just 3 hours one way, 6 hours total. You basically ate away a Sunday. And I mean, I will talk up Nick like I know you do too. A great guy. I loved working with him. And that was just purely a family decision too. Like after a few months, like, hey, I can't do this anymore, but man, keep rocking. I love what you're doing. And, if I can, I will try to go to a show of his. I mean, in all honesty, I really haven't because, again, when I left, it was right around the time I was getting ready to pick up and go to Orlando.
Right.
But anyways, I go to Orlando and I join what's called the Spark program there at Full Sail. And what the Spark program is that's basically your student production team. And that's who's responsible for producing shows like NXT, and it's not just NXT. They have like concerts there. I mean, they have celebrity guests all the time.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that they do that people would be very impressed with what they do there.
Yes, I want to. Anybody who watches like Happy Days, like I actually got to work with Donnie Most in the Orlando Orchestra, so it was so that was really cool to do to work with other things besides wrestling. But let's dive into like the NXT experience. I essentially became an intern for the WWE at that point. So NXT, I'm kind of jealous because now it's a weekly thing, being live and all. But when I was there, it was a once a month thing. Every 3 to 4 weeks, they would come to campus. We would spend a Tuesday. Usually the shows were on a Wednesday or Thursday. We would spend the day before setting up everything. And we would work hand in hand with a lot of their veteran crew. I know these guys probably wouldn't remember me from Adam, but there's there was Skipper and there's Sean, two people that I work with closely there too, that are actually full time. Like they do a lot of stuff for WWE. And they you essentially report to them and they show you the ropes and you do a lot of hands-on. WWE does not lie when they say NXT is a Full Sail student produced show. It 100% is. They're just there to guide us, the crew, the crew chiefs, into doing, the right thing, everything the right way. So the very first one I did there was the follow-up show, the tapings from WrestleMania 34 34, whatever, 35, I think was the New Orleans one. It was the follow-up show taping to that. And man, it was just really cool. I just remember getting so many butterflies just on setup day, just driving to Full Sail, because it just felt like all this hard work up to this point, and I knew it was just an internship. I'm like, you're at the very bottom of the totem pole. But at the same time, I'm like, man, I felt like I was on cloud nine. I was on top of the world. And like I said, those crew chiefs on those setup days made you feel comfortable. Well, now let's go into like show day. So we report there at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. The wrestlers start getting there around 1. I tell you what, I get there at 7 o'clock and there's this big old black RV next to like the NXT trucks that we unloaded the day before. And I'm just like, oh, I'm going to say that's Triple H. Well, lo and behold, I'm walking to go to the backstage area. Triple H comes out on his phone, just like walks right past me. I'm like, okay, this is about to get real. Like, right. This is like, holy crap, this is absolutely real. Well, so what do we do on a show day? Well, I was responsible, a part of a team on the vignette room. And what that is all the promos that you saw. Like, I was really never in the live venue where the actual show takes place. We're across the way in a classroom that we converted into a backstage area. And we were responsible for, getting those promos done. Like, we would be under crew chiefs. They'd be handed scripts throughout the day. And the mantra is right. We would get scripts. We would get different versions of scripts throughout the day too. Like, there'd be a first draft at like 1 o'clock, but then 2 o'clock comes around. Hey, we're on the third draft. Here you go. Here's your updated script. And I held different roles with that too. I started off as a production supervisor, worked my way up to a camera assistant, and then worked my way up to what's called a DIT. And that's basically everything that we shot. I would coordinate with the script supervisor. Everything we shot, I had to label a certain way, put it into the proprietary system WWE has, send that to Stanford, and oh, by the way, there might be a couple that we need to get out to the show floor right away for the live crowd. So talk about pressure being on.
Right.
That was one of the last positions that I held there. But a funny story with all that too. I think this was my third show. I told the Triple H story, which I will say with Triple H, man, it's no act. Like, he cares about that brand, and I know that personally because I wasn't stalking or anything. I hate to sound like a fanboy, but when we weren't doing anything in the vignette room, I would ask our crew chief, hey, can I go to the live venue and watch the rehearsals? And I would sit in a bench, and literally feet away from me would be like, Matt Bloom, Triple H, sometimes Scott Hall was there, Shawn Michaels was there, like people I grew up just like idolizing, and just seeing them, on that professional level, like actually getting to, look up to them in a new way, seeing how they conduct the shows, what goes on in a show day and their aspect, and comparing it to what I did at Magnum Pro for a long time. And it was just unreal. But it was one time we go to lunch after I was watching rehearsals. I go back to the vignette room, nobody's there, and I start working on like one of the lights on the truss system. It was kind of like kicked off balance. So I'm down there like kind of plugging it, replugging in, making sure it's all balanced. Shawn Michaels just walks right on through. He peeks in, looks at me, he's like, how's it going, young man? And I will say, like, again, I am 100% professional. I will never fanboy out because I know the professionalism, but inside, I was
just about passed out, didn't you? You just about passed out.
Inside, I was a little boy again.
Yeah.
Like, you just screaming like, oh my gosh. And that goes back to what I said earlier. That 1996 pay-per-view I went to, my favorite wrestler, Shawn Michaels,
right. Main
event. I am now literally in the same room as him as a professional, not as a fan anymore too. And that just, that meant the world to me. Yes, a fanboying out there, but like at the end of the night, I'm just like, I'm not gonna like sugarcoat. There's actually tears when that happens, because it's like all that hard work paid off.
Right.
So it was about a summer of that in NXT. And that's just kind of going over the NXT stuff. I was still trying to search for full-time work down there too, because this was essentially an internship, but they have like, the student work program where you get a little bit of money too. But it's by far no means to provide for your family in the middle of Orlando, Florida, which is super expensive.
Yeah.
And we were getting at that point where I couldn't fathom spending the money and I wasn't getting a job. Well, lo and behold, I think it was about a couple days before we were getting ready to pick up and move, I get a phone interview with WWE for a position at the Performance Center. And this was like content strategist, or I can't remember what content innovation lab is what it was called, to be a producer in that. And that's like, again, promos and all this. Got the recommendation from essentially those crew chiefs. I have the phone interview, we go over pay, and not to out WWE, but again, this is kind of like an entry level position to them. It's just, it wouldn't cut it for, family of four in the middle of Orlando. Rent is insane. You're talking like $1,400, $1,500 a month.
Right.
A lot of places, before they even let you sign a lease, are like, give us 3 months rent up front. I'm like, who has that sort of money?
Right. I don't think you're really outing them. I just think that it's a realization of what actually truly happens. I mean, it's not all glitz and glamour. You have to start from somewhere, and sometimes you got to start, even if it's a big corporation, you got to start from the bottom, and that's where your hard work shows, that if you keep doing that, you'll have success later in life. And this is just another staple, another step that you had to go through.
Yep. And and you'd be surprised. I think, actually, it's probably no surprise. A lot of the wrestlers live together down there too, because it's such a high rent place, and they're not exactly getting the fat paychecks we would think they would have with WWE. I mean, it is a corporation. There's, different levels of pay and all that. But after the phone interview, just kind of had that tough decision at that point. Like, we're getting ready to head back home. That dream job's in the palm of my hand, but it's definitely not going to be able to provide for the family. Again, very emotional time, hard decision. 24 hours later, I emailed the gentleman who gave me the interview, and I'm just like, it's great, talking to you. I kind of told him the situation, thanked him for the interview, but said I'll have to decline this position. And then we moved back to Omaha. Again, it was probably one of the toughest decisions that I have ever made in my life. Again, you've worked so hard to get to that point. That dream is finally in the palm of your hands. But at the end of the day, I care about my family more than wrestling or any entertainment or any dreams of mine too. That is who I, as a man, am responsible for. And I had to make that decision. It was really, at the end of the day, it's really not a tough decision. It really wasn't. No. But it's still.
But I think they respect you, though. I would have to say that that's one of the ways that you did it was the right way to do it. Just be upfront and honest with them, and I think they'll respect you. So I don't think, and it's kind of cheesy to say this, but I don't think the door is shut on your situation by any means.
And it's exactly what Chrissy said at one point too, and kind of something we discussed too, that it left on good terms. He did respond, and he actually said exactly what you said. I can respect that. I completely understand. It is tough to live here. Best of luck, in your career path. And, that was it. And, it's been discussed between me and Chrissy, hey, when the kids get older, they're out of the house. I mean, when my kids turn 18, 19, 20, I'm still going to be in, very early 40s, so it's going to be, it wouldn't be that out of the realm of possibility to, hey, Chrissy, you and I, let's go buy an RV and let's just hit the road with WWE, or just buy a really good car and just travel everywhere.
Well, with everything that's been happening and transpiring in this last couple weeks and months and year, especially now this week, I don't think that you're going to be a loss for opportunities in the production area by any means.
Well, thank you for that. But I think, we get back to Omaha. And behind the scenes, we made it a surprise that I was going to return to Magnum Pro. Jason Strife and I kind of discussed, we'll kind of make this a big surprise. I'll be director of operations. And so that was kind of like, that was comforting on that level. Like, hey, I'm not out of the wrestling game. I could still do this. Take everything that you learned, and it was a lot, from my time in Orlando, and apply it to here.
Well, we can't just get away with not expressing that you had a few cameos NXT shows. You know I'm not going to let you get away with that. See once again, people, I will get this out of him. There have been several camos that we've all known that we were sharing on our individual Facebook pages and all that. But yes, he had quite a bit of cameos in the NXT shows that were live on or at least showing on NXT on the WWE network.
And it was funny how those popped up. Our crew chief, we would be shooting a promo, and he's like, "Okay, I need somebody in the background." And you know me, I'm just like, I'm good. I'm just gonna, help in the camera or lighting department. Until one time, it was literally me and 4 other people. Well, those 4 other people literally had a cameo earlier on something. They were in the background, like, "Oh, we can't use the same people. You're gonna have to go out there." And so they put me at a table, and me and a couple other people that they picked out already from like the live venue portion, people who are actually part of the actual main show. Like, "Hey, you're going to sit at these tables. Here's what's going to happen." They ran through a couple times. It was, lo and behold, Candice LeRae and Shayna Baszler. I cannot express how important that cameo was and how like the universe speaks to you sometimes, because at this point, and I'll bring up the whole Shayna Baszler thing too. At this point, I worked with her twice. I like in the indie scenes here in the local area. I didn't bring that up, but I didn't fanboy or anything like that. I'm sure she would have no idea who I was because of what I do behind the scenes. But so they lay out this promo, and then Candice LeRae walks by, and she and Shayna Baszler have a confrontation. I'm in the background on my stupid cell phone. They're like, "Yeah, just act like you're on your cell phone, and then act surprised when they start hitting each other." Well, okay, there's the connection with Shayna Baszler. Then there's the connection with an old classmate of mine that I, in my bachelor's for film, he actually is an employee for WWE. His name's Andrew Carr. He works at the PC, and he was actually one of the quote quote agents who pulled them apart. And it was just really cool, kind of seeing how the universe speaks to you. Like, how in the world did these people that I had connections to in some way play a part in that cameo that I had too?
Right.
It's even more weird hearing, that your connections with Candice LeRae's brother too. It's like, that just kind of makes that whole situation even more weird to me.
The fellow co-host Cole Dawson, he isn't afraid to mention that he is, because let me tell you a little quick story about that. So I have to give a shout out to Dave Tigerman Smith. He's the one that made that possible, because he basically was like, "Hey, I got one of my friends going to be on the show. I think it's a good idea." And I'm like, "Fine, yeah, that'll be great." He was going to be a special guest. And he didn't tell me right away. So we get on there, and we're all, doing these live Facebook message chats, and he finally tells me what's going on. And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, hey, nice to meet you, Cole." And he drops the bomb, like, "Hey, I'm Candice LeRae's brother." And I'm like, "Say again?" And he tells me that. And I'm like, "Okay, so we need a picture." And I told him, I'm just being respectful. I'm like, you don't have to have a picture with anything of, anybody in there particular. And he's like, "No, it's cool, dude. It's cool." So like, I already have my picture for the Tiger Man, because he's a regular host of it. They do all the work. I just sit there and talk, as a lot of people know. I talk a little bit too much, but I told him, I was like, "Yeah, just a picture of you or whatever." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got one." And I'm like, "Okay, well, like I said, you don't have to put anything relation to anything that you have. You just, I don't want to have anybody try to like bother you on Facebook or any social media or whatever." No, he's like, "Oh, I'm good." And then here's a picture. And I'm like, bam. I'm like, okay, I guess you weren't just going to just lightly, go into this. You're just going to hit a home run right away. So he puts a picture of him with his brother-in-law. Now, if anybody knows who his brother-in-law is, then, they can figure that out themselves. But, with the NXT championship on his shoulder, like, I mean, okay. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not afraid to brag about it." So Cole's a good dude. I'm blessed, and I'm honored to have him on there. And I thank Dave every time. I thank him every time that we're done doing a show. But yeah, it's funny how these last couple of shows that have been following through that have these connections to NXT. And, I'm really proud of everybody that's involved in this. I'm proud of Shayna, obviously, because I know that she's from South Dakota. She works her ass off. I'm glad that she, with the information that I got from her family about why she uses Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because I can tell you what, my son went ape crap for that every time he hears that, when as soon as she got in there. But then with you too, and everybody that has promotions, like I said. So, yeah, keep going on and talking about your story here. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
No, you're
there.
good. You're good. Yeah, and it was just funny. And I mean, I didn't even mention like Steve Carino was a part of that too, and he's trading a local guy named Pat Powers too. Actions too. Him and Candice LeRae are pretty. What's the word? Absolutely, some of the nicest people that I did get to work with in the promo room too. Absolutely down to earth, and I'll give a shout out to a couple other guys too, like the Undisputed Era. Absolutely amazing guys too. I think every single taping that I did, we did a promo with Undisputed Era, and they would actually start cracking jokes with us, the crew, because we started making that relationship, and it's part of our rules. Like, hey, don't talk to the wrestlers unless they talk to you. Well,
right.
I mean, they would crack jokes all the time and be great. And then Mauro Ranallo, like, I mean, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but man, what an amazing guy. Like, he would genuinely come in there and have conversations with us, ask how life is going. And if you know anything about his history of like mental illness, that plays a part in that too, and the depression. But he would genuinely cut conversations with us and just be like,
I'll take a little heat off of you. Like, if anybody doesn't like Moralo, like, they just don't know what they're talking about. So, I mean, you can at me if you want. I don't care.
I'll throw Jeremy under the bus. He is not a Mauro Ranallo fan.
All right. Well, Jeremy and I will have a few conversations then.
Make that note, yeah. But, like, yeah,
we like you, Jeremy. We like you, but, we got to give you a little rib once in a while.
He would genuinely like have those conversations. And then what's really funny, and this is, the last kind of story I'll tell about the vignette room. Our vignette room, how this whole structure was, it's literally it's the math classroom at Full Sail University. We split this room into two. On one side is your vignette room, and then we have this huge heavy black curtain that goes across the middle that we kind of like rigged up and everything. And on that side is the women's locker room. They would have conversations all the time, and I'll tell you what, Shayna was probably one of the funniest women in that locker room. Like, the jokes she was saying out loud, just her interactions that we could clearly hear all the time, that we're trying to like stifle our laughter on the other end too. But an absolute leader too, because there was times where they would kind of be talking, and we'd shoot a promo, and she'd be one of the first, like, hey, shut up, they're doing promos or whatever. But like, man, again, it's funny, like, having that connection with her, but not really acting on it when I'm down there, because again, I don't want to be that fanboy. But it was just, it's so cool to see her have that opportunity, and how fast she grew into that opportunity and earned that opportunity too.
Right.
But, and anyways, going back to that cameo, that was great. And then it was the next taping afterwards. The crew chief that I was with, he was like, well, we need another extra, and this one was I can't even remember who was in the promo, honestly. But he's like, yeah, we need people in the background again. And he looks at me, he's like, you go be on your cell phone again. I'm like, oh, so is that going to be the running joke?
It was a running joke, just so you know. Back over here, we're like, God, every time he's in the background, he's always on his phone. I wonder what he's doing, because he's always on his phone. Or there he's on his phone again.
and it's funny because in the first promo, a cameo that I did, I was playing Angry Birds. The second one, I'm actually texting my wife, telling her the whole scenario. I'm like, well, I'm sitting here texting you as they're filming a promo, and I'm on my cell phone.
I was just going to ask you that question. Like, let's hear the spoiler alert. What were you actually doing on your phone?
Angry Birds was quite fun on that first go around. The second time, I just had to, because the situation was funny. Even the producer, the segment producer, was having a good laugh at it too. Just like, you're going to be on your cell phone again. And I'm pretty sure if I stuck around, I'd be on my cell phone even more. But holy crap, oh man. So yeah, those cameos were a lot of fun. Unexpected. Didn't ask for them, but man, I look back on them. That's essentially my souvenir from my time in NXT. Looking back on it, I'm thankful I had those, because again, you're there to work. I would, even if it wasn't a rule, all the people that I've worked with, I don't have one picture with any of them, because there's a fan Logan, and then there's that professional side of me, and I stand by that 100%. So That is why that is on my Facebook wall, because that is the crew shirt that I have. Those are my only two souvenirs from my time uh, in Orlando too. So,
Well,
but yeah.
speaking of things that I can be glad and give shout outs to, I want to give a shout out to Now This Is Wrestling. Now, thank you for being able to sponsor this edition of the show. I would also like to thank Remedy Brewing Company. It's the remedy for what ails you. I also want to give a thank out to Jekyll and Hyde Barbecue. You can find them on Facebook at Jekyll and Hyde Barbecue. And then Midwest All Pro Wrestling. Go to MidwestAllProWrestling.com for tickets and experience the excitement. Now, I didn't just say your name as a sponsor. I wanted to also say that out there to let you have an opportunity to tell people where to get a hold of Now This Is Wrestling, where to find it, how to get tickets, and what's your next event that's coming up here.
So Now This Is Wrestling, you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Now This Is Wrestling. You can find us on Instagram, instagram.com/Now This Is Wrestling, or searching Now This Is Wrestling. YouTube, I believe it's youtube.com, Now This Is Wrestling TV. We usually, when we have our shows, we go through Ticket Leap as our ticket broker. And our next show is going to be February 1st. Now, I know the news has been out there. You know, we actually were going to have a show scheduled for this upcoming Saturday, October 5th. But just due to some low ticket sales and kind of, again, taking that financial role and that responsibility to kind of pulling the plug on that and not wanting to have us lose so much money. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's really rough to have shows here in the Omaha area in October.
Yeah, I just wanted to add for you, if you don't mind, that in the Midwest, October is kind of like the downtime when it comes to running independent pro wrestling shows. Now, there's a lot of them now. That's not saying that, you know, one has more ticket sales than the other. It's just that in South Dakota, in the Midwest, in this upper area, shows don't technically like sell out or get a lot of tickets just because it's just that downtime. So This is just a way to revamp a little things, have a little time to have a bigger and better show, and it's not a negative. So I just wanted to put that out there for people that don't know this area that well.
And it's appreciated. I typed up that whole entire, I guess you would call press release on the whole scenario, and it's thinking long term. You know,
right?
Yes, we're disappointed with not having a show, but absolutely understanding that, you know, there's a lot of other things to do in Omaha. We're not the only entertainment option, and we look at that as a chance for us to grow in our marketing department, find new ways to build from there and learn from this. You know, I will self-admit that we kind of went into this not with egos or anything, but we're like, hey, we can make October happen. Let's do this. We'll change it around. When it started not looking like that, you know, a couple weeks ago, that's kind of where we had that main conversation, or that really deep conversation at the beginning of this week, where, you know, we're like, kind of have to do it. And I mean, I kind of made that final call. I did have a lot of fight with Jeremy, and again, it's that respect, that brotherhood him and I have, where, you know, he knew it was the right call, but it didn't make him any more like happy about the situation. Again, not to steal too much of his thunder, because he has a hell of a story when it comes to now too, but he had other reasons why he was upset with that certain scenario.
Right.
But,
and you know, you're going to have that. When I do special event coordinating, I've had a lot of events that I've had to cancel, and it's just smart business. It's realizing what your limitations are, and it makes for a bigger and better show next time. So, I mean, the only reason why you guys probably had an argument is because you guys are both passionate about what you do, and that's completely acceptable. That's what you need to have, and that's a healthy working relationship right there, because you have to be able to discuss things.
And I think that happens every single time that we meet and discuss future shows too. And and that's kind of why we jumped into this together too, because we knew, I mean, just in our time, just everything we've done together, and the, you know, few years that I've known him, he's essentially became a brother to me, and you know, a number one supporter. I'll tell you, he got really emotional when I went down to Orlando too. Just definitely happy, but I mean, he wrote me like a note inside a card, just basically said, you know, I feel like I'm losing a brother, but man, I could not be more proud of you. So there's just that special relationship between me and Jeremy, and it's just a bond that's just going to be really hard to break and hard to shatter. And we have to look out for each other. And ultimately, like I said, making this call was me kind of putting on the big boy pants and making that call and say, I know you're going to hate it, but it's the best thing to do.
And see, that's what I like about having a team instead of
Mhm.
actually working by yourself, because then you have that yin, that yang, that one that's going to be your Jiminy Cricket on certain situations, and then vice versa, telling you like, hey, you need to stop, you slow back, and it's just it's great for business, that teamwork part of it. And I'm not trying to take a slogan from the big man himself down in NXT, but it is good for business. It's what's best for business when you can realize that, when you guys can have those healthy arguments and debates. And I shouldn't say arguments, but the way that everything happened and played out, that's the best way to deal with it. That's the best way to successfully succeed in the long term, and that's eventually your plan that you want, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely. And and you'll kind of see as we start making announcements for February 1st, we're probably right on the cusp of making some announcements with that too. But like what we had prepared for that show, it's kind of like this smaller show. Do we lose a whole bunch of money to try to tell a story to make this February show make sense? Or do we just make this February show happen? And I think for the time being, Now TV was a fun concept, something that we could have did, but I think at this point in the game, while we're still trying to gain our foot, we're going to probably, 2 to 3 shows a year, really big shows that are just going to be explosive along the lines of phase 2, bringing in a couple guests, just try to just bring some new talent to the Omaha area. And I'm not just talking like major indie stars too, like looking for like maybe some lesser known indie stars that'll give some variety in the area too, because I mean, I love a lot of the the wrestlers that are here in the area, but I think almost in the same way a lot of our fan base in this Midwest community want to see a lot more and see beyond this Midwest too.
Right.
It is huge wrestling world, and this mindset definitely came from my time in NXT. It's like there is a whole new world of wrestling out there too that we need to become aware of, and that is kind of a main vision of Now too. It's now is the time to bring something new, bring something fresh, and we don't want to become this other indie wrestling promotion 2.0. We don't want to do the same things too, and we're learning along the way too. And that's, like I said, this whole Now TV thing was a learning curve. We are scrapping it for now, and then we're gonna go forward and just putting on some explosive shows. And I will say, anybody in the Midwest, one of my prime inspirations, and I think if you're any promoter in the area and you're not inspired by this particular promoter, you are insane. But that promoter is Eric Cannon, First Wrestling in Minnesota. That guy throws the best wrestling shows 2 to 4 times a year. Like, he has 2 major shows at the historic First Avenue in Minneapolis, and then he maybe has a couple side shows here and there, and those things are packed to the brim because he doesn't focus on the fluff. He just puts on really entertaining wrestling shows. And that's what we want to start doing.
Just to give him another shout out, he's the actual first person, because I mean, I kind of always try to look at YouTube and look at different independent shows and what they have, but he is the first person. I'm going to give a shout out to Tyson Warren and shout out to Charlie Eccles, as you'd probably know those two. They were the first ones when they had the video, and that's where I saw MJF. Now, that's when I was like, who is this guy? And then I found out MLW had him on. And if it wasn't for First Avenue, if it wasn't for you or Charlie or Tyson or Nick or even Jason Strife, I would not have seen MJF. So that's the kind of outreach that you guys all have here in this Midwestern tri-state area, upper level of the Midwest.
And I'm going to brush by the surface on there too. Like, I will, and I don't think it's a secret to a lot of our fan base and some of the boys here too. Jason Strife and I aren't exactly on the best terms anymore. However, I will never take away his knack for finding and breeding great talent in the area too. And he is a great recruiter. I'll even throw another name out there too, who has his finger on the pulse of wrestlers in the area, and that's Duke Cornell. Guy is damn talented in the ring, but man, does he want to start looking towards the future. And he is a hell of a person to kind of like get those ideas from, who to bring in and who to look at. I mean, he's the type of guy who's showed us, we really want to focus on the women of Now, the women's wrestling area that's really not focused on in this area too much. And we look at him and Buns of Steel, Jay Fowler, really kind of help us recruit. And man, they knock it out the park. There's so many people that we're going to bring in it's just going to take some time and whatnot too. And we are absolutely excited about that.
Right.
So.
And I'm really excited to be able to have you on the show. I want to thank you once again for being on there. I do want to have you on the show once again. And, I'm going to give a shout-out to Jeremy Lovish. I know that he's out there, and I'm going to have that rescheduled because I know we were supposed to do that like a couple weeks ago. But I kind of had some things happen that I needed to help my family with. But
family happens.
Well, yeah, family happens, and it had to be done. But, no, my name is DJ Barbecue. This is Logan Davis, the godfather of video in the Midwest. Yeah, I said it. I thanks everybody for on the show. Peace.